Awesome. Thank you all for joining us for this STEM Learn event, and especially thank you to Brandon. So before we sort of jump into questions, we could kind of go around and do some quick introductions so we know who's here. So to just kick it off, my name is Olivia Fallen. I work as a career and industry specialist here at ASU. I specifically work with our STEM career interest community, and we thought this would be a great event just for students to kind of casually interact with an employer. So I'll kick it over to Beverly.
Hello, everyone. My name is Beverly Johnson. I'm also a career and industry specialist here at ASU in our career and professional development department.
Hello, and my name is Nick Ferraro. I'm also a career and industry specialist with Career and Professional Development Services. And Olivia and myself partner pretty closely on industry as far as STEM. And so we've been creating some events and other things around that. Nice to meet you, and I'll pass it off to Ricardo or Asa as our student participants.
I'm currently I'm doing my master's degree in electrical engineering program right now, and then this is my second semester. I'm interested in working for Viasat, but I'm not sure that because I've heard the last time I contact them, the response from them was basically they are only looking for US citizens, so which was a little bit disappointing. But yeah, we'll see.
Hello, I'm Ricardo Hernandez. I'm a forensic science major at ASU. I originally was gonna originally signed on to view for the STEM with Rex from Arizona DPS, but I'm just here just to learn about other careers.
Thank you, Ricardo. We appreciate you still coming in. We are going to try to get Scott Rex back in the fall for another event, so keep your eyes on Handshake for that as well. All right, that leaves us with Brandon.
Thank you, and thank both of you for logging on right now. Appreciate it. I know things are probably in flux for everybody, so I really appreciate that. My name is Brandon Lobb. I am a University Relations Campus Specialist for Viasat's University Recruiting Team, which is kind of a weird, convoluted title. What it basically means is I'm the on-campus focused recruiter for ASU, as well as most of our Western United States schools. So I have a portfolio of schools where I am the main point of contact for all things Viasat recruitment and relations at those schools. Yeah, so I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. So to kind of kick it off, could you just tell us a little bit about just your professional journey, how you got into this position? I was looking on your LinkedIn. I saw you had some teaching experience in Teach for America. And yeah, so if you could kind of just walk us through a little bit of your professional journey and also just a little bit about your company as well.
Yeah, for sure. So my professional journey is sort of unique. Out of college, so my senior year of college, didn't really know what I was going to do. I was an English literature major. Lots of English lit majors don't know what they're going to do. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll go back and get my teaching credential. So in my senior year, a coworker of mine, I was working at a UPS store, mentioned Teach for America. And he was like, I think you'd be good for that. So I kind of applied on a whim my senior year and got in, which was pretty cool. So got accepted to Teach for America, graduated with my bachelor's in English, and then moved to Las Vegas to teach with Teach for America for a couple of years. So I did Teach for America, taught in Vegas. I taught high school English for 2 years. And then towards the tail end of my commitment with Teach for America, staff at TFA got a hold of me and they're like, we think you'd have good potential to be a recruiter. Is that something you'd ever considered? And I hadn't. I'd never thought about it. But they told me that most of the positions were work from home, and I would have the opportunity to move back to San Diego, where I'm from. So I applied and I got it. And so that's how I got into recruitment. It's one of those things you don't really know where your career is going to take you, but I've always pursued opportunities when they presented themselves. So wound up doing recruiting, recruited with Teach for America for a couple years. And then I got a phone call from a former colleague who also was a recruiter at Teach for America. And she had moved on to be a recruiter at Viasat. And she actually has helped build the university relations team at Viasat. And she told me, hey, we have an opening coming up, and I think you'd be really good for it. So I went, had lunch with her team. It's really cool, beautiful campus, cool place to work. And a few months later, she texted me. She's like, hey, the position's officially open. Go apply. And here I am. So now I've been working at Viasat for almost 2 years. And it's been great. So it's kind of a interesting career path I've taken. I had no interest in recruiting before I got into it, which is not that unique for recruiters. No one generally goes to school like going, I'm going to be a recruiter. It's something you kind of discover or fall into. I think what is most important to note for students around my career path is, one, pursuing opportunities when they present themselves, even if you're pushing yourself outside a comfort zone. It's really helpful. And then leveraging professional networks. So throughout my career, I've had a lot of doors open for me because of the relationships I've built with colleagues, and maintaining those relationships after we were no longer colleagues, and I just kept that network up, whether that's just grabbing a coffee here and there, or a text to say like, hey, how's the recruiting season going now that you're at such and such company? And those relationships are pretty key to building anyone's career, I think. And the farther along you get in your career, you kind of see this spider web branch out, of you find yourself knowing people at all sorts of different levels and all sorts of different companies. So I think that's really valuable for students. So thinking about, switching gears now, think about Viasat. I'm not sure how much people who watch this will know about Viasat, so I'll just kind of do a broad overview. Viasat is a global communications company. The main way in which we provide communication is through satellite connectivity, so satellite internet. Something that makes Viasat sort of unique is that we are split sort of into two business areas. There's commercial business, and then there's government, which is a very unique kind of advantage for us as a company, because we have about 50% of our revenue comes from government contracts, and we are a longstanding DoD government contractor since our start. We started only doing government business, and then now about 50% is through commercial. So that includes in-home Wi-Fi, in-flight Wi-Fi, stuff like that. So we have those two different parts of the company, which has actually helped us a lot, because we are able to take some chances in our commercial side, because we have such a long-standing relationship and have sort of that base in the government side, where we can branch out. So that's really cool. So what Viasat is currently working on is, in Tempe, which is pretty cool, we're building the payloads for our next 3 satellites, which is going to be a constellation of 3 very high capacity, high Earth orbit satellites. When those launch, which the first one should be launched in the next year, we'll be the first truly global internet service provider. So we'll be able to provide internet to anyone on the planet, which is pretty cool. And that's something that when we started this was not really like in fashion and wasn't the cool thing to do. And now companies like SpaceX and Amazon have got on board with this idea that we should have some sort of global internet coverage through like OneWeb and SpaceX. So it's something that our company has been working towards for a long time. And we're really proud of that fact that we will be the first operational global ISP here in the next few years. And we already provide internet service through our own satellites right now.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I didn't realize, excuse me, you all were also contracted with the government. That's awesome. So kind of in that same vein, how would you describe the culture of your company at large? And are there any like top attributes you look for in new hires, regardless of what discipline they come from?
Yeah, so the company culture is pretty laid back. like very laid back, if I'm being honest. Our headquarters is in northern San Diego, and that's kind of the culture that the whole company's adopted. Is pretty laid back. I wear a t-shirt and jeans to work every day. Some people wear like shorts and flip-flops, especially in Tempe when it's hot in the summer. You see lots of shorts and flip-flops. It's a very laid back culture. It's a culture that's built around the idea that the company really cares about its employees, which I know a lot of companies say. And what I always tell students is like, try to find a way to actually see if they're living that culture out in their day-to-day. Are you seeing employees actually enjoying their work? What is their actual, you can look at their benefits, but what do they actually do to say that they care about their employees? So in a lot of ways, the culture makes my job really easy because I bring engineers and representatives from Viasat on campus, and I never really worry like, oh, are they going to say the wrong thing? Because genuinely, I think people are happy. And the philosophy around that is, I think our leadership knows that people do their best work when they are happy and they feel taken care of. And in times like these, it's really nice to have a company like that having your back. It just, things are very uncertain in the world right now. And I feel very secure and supported by the company I work for, so it's really nice.
Definitely. I totally agree as far as people do their best work when they're happy. So can you talk to some of the like are there any of the like top skills I'll look for regardless of discipline, or does it really vary?
Yeah, sorry, that was the second part of the question. In general, so tolerance for ambiguity is one of our core values at Viasat. And a large part of the reason why, and our CEO kind of reiterates this often, is we are trying to do things no one else has ever done. So if you're somebody who needs a clear playbook or the right way to do things, we might not be the right place for you, because if we're doing what we should be doing, we're blazing the path and no one has ever done it before. So with that comes some ambiguity. We don't exactly know what the next step is all the time, which can be frustrating for some people. I think it can be frustrating for everyone at some point, but it's what makes us unique. And it's also what makes us be able to strategically pivot pretty quickly. So times like these, we try to frame it around like, okay, things can be tough right now, but they also could be a chance for opportunity. So one of the things we're leaning into is we are trying to make the world a more connected place. And we are now seeing in a time like this that the ability for everyone to have access to quality internet connectivity and communication is paramount. So we're seeing that as an opportunity. So being sort of flexible, understanding that you're not going to be told exactly what to do, I think is an attribute we look for at Viasat in general. Another one is leadership. We really like people to step up and take the lead. Viasat is a flat organization, so we don't have these really robust org charts. Quite the contrary, it's actually very hard to find any semblance of an org chart around, which can be really frustrating for some people, because you're like, I don't know who to ask. I don't know who's above me to figure out something from. But I think it's really empowering, because as soon as you're a Viasat employee, you are part of the team and you can really lead. You can take on new projects. If you make a really good case for it, you can build something yourself, build a new role, which I think is really cool. So leadership is another really big one.
Definitely. So when you're, as a recruiter looking at students' resumes, are there any experiences that really jump out at you, whether that's internships, clubs, or again, does that really, vary from student to student?
I think it varies student to student, because I think it depends upon what you want to actually have your resume be a clear articulation of what your experiences are. And I'll have students who have a ton of internships, and that's great, and the experience is really good. But then I'll talk to students who are kind of insecure about their resume because they don't have as many internships. But for example, they had to work a part-time job throughout all of college in order to pay their rent. And I think that's also a valuable thing to know. I think I've talked to a lot of hiring managers who, when they see that on a resume, like, oh, this person worked at Starbucks part-time for 4 years when they went to college, and they still had these projects. I think what's important to do then is really highlight your skills and where you've used them, even if it's not necessarily always in an internship, because you had to work during the summer, or you had to work during the year. And then how did you take on personal projects, again, to sharpen the skills that you've built in your classwork? Or what are some of the class projects you've done? Kind of thinking from that engineering STEM lens. Trying to think of other things that really jump out. Honestly, just make sure that your resume is a really concise, clear articulation of the work you've done. I would say for anyone who's an undergrad and even probably up to master's, it's really pushing it if you're over a page. 2 pages is probably more than enough, like too much in 90% of cases. If you're a PhD student, that's a little different. But if you're undergrad and it's over a page, you need to cut it down. There's no reason for it to ever be over a page. And try to boil it down to the really important things and then quantify any results you've ever had. If we can see a number placed upon the skill you have that says like, oh, I made this production line 20% more effective, that will make you stand out.
Yeah, definitely. We're always, when we're meeting with students, like quantify, that means a lot more than just very broadly speaking about things.
Yeah, the way I talk to students usually is it's just, if you don't quantify anything, it's just kind of anecdotal. I can't take it as real. There's no data to support it. So as much as you can build your case, it will help you in the long run.
Definitely. And I'll also add, this is pretty informal. So any of the students that are on, you're more than welcome to sort of jump in and ask questions, or if you want to wait till the end, that's totally fine as well. So I know you said as a recruiter, you kind of broadly hire across different disciplines. Are there any like top technical skills that you're aware of that you all look for, like any software platforms that stand out?
A lot of our teams use Python. I've heard that. I mean, Python, C++, Java. It depends on the team. Like we're hiring so broadly, and what you're doing if you're an embedded software engineer in Tempe is going to be vastly different than if you're developing an app in Carlsbad. So it depends. What I would say is for any student to look at the job description, and it'll outline pretty clearly what are the top languages or skills needed for that role. Our recruiters and hiring managers do a pretty good job of being very transparent about that. So I would just look, a company our size, hiring the amount of positions we hire, there's no like 1 or 2 skills. What I would say is it's really nice to see, thinking around programming language or thinking in these schools, seeing what are your strongest skills, and then kind of have a rating system within your resume or a tiering system of what you're most strong, what you're sort of proficient, and what you're still learning. That gives us kind of a lens on what your potential could be or how comfortable you are kind of learning new things. I've known lots of folks who got hired and they're going to have to use a language that they're not super familiar with, but they were able to answer questions in the coding language that they are super familiar with. And the hiring managers are like, oh, they figured that out. They just want to know, this is how you think. We can teach you whatever language you need to learn. It's more learning about how do you operate, how do you think.
Definitely, thank you. So I know as a career specialist, I've seen sort of a uptick in students that maybe don't come from a STEM background or have a STEM major that are interested in STEM jobs.
Yeah.
And how important do you think it is to have an engineering degree if you're wanting to go into engineering or, you know, something of that nature? Or do you think as long as you can prove you have some of those transferable skills?
I think that is a bigger discussion the industry of tech is having at large, is around what is the value proposition of somebody who has a bachelor's in computer science versus somebody who has a certificate from a coding camp, right? They may have their bachelor's in literature, but they spent 6 months to learn to code. And it kind of depends. I think that's a broader question. I know Viasat is looking at that. We will, in some cases, hire folks outside of STEM degrees if they have experience in the fields that we need them to have experience in. We don't care that much. It's more about what are your skills, what are your abilities. That being said, I think it's really hard for like a senior out of college who's spent the last 4 years learning, anthropology to really prove that they should come in as a software engineer at Viasat, because you're really getting thrown into the deep end. I would say that's a pretty hard leap, but double majors, I definitely have seen that happen pretty often. And I think that's a broader conversation that the industry is going to have around what are some of those non-traditional pathways that folks get into tech. Also, I would say getting your foot in the doors goes a long way. I know Viasat's really great about giving people the opportunity to kind of blaze the path they want. So there are a lot of engineers who come in as electrical engineers or mechanical engineers who are now doing software, because that's what they found out they really wanted to do. Which is, again, it's still engineering, but it is a pretty vastly different skill set. But they got their foot in the door, and then Viasat got behind them to push them to do what they wanted to do.
Yeah, I always encourage students that are interested, for anyone watching or may watch in the future, I think micro-credentialing can sometimes be a really good way to build some of that competency if you find yourself in that situation. So getting like certificates, really basic level internships, things of that nature are always good to consider as well. Okay, so kind of speaking to your company, what do you find to be some of the most challenging and also rewarding aspects of your role?
Of my role specifically, challenging is kind of shifting to the needs of the business as they happen. So year over year, our needs shift a little bit when it comes to intern and university grad hiring. So 2 years ago when I first got hired, we were hiring like 90% software engineers. So our campus strategies were very much like computer science orgs, find software engineers, we can't get enough software engineers. And then this last year and moving forward, there has been a need for a shift in that. So now we're hiring a lot more. We're still bulk of our roles, more like 75-80% are still software, but we're now hiring a lot more electrical engineers to do like systems test and system engineering roles, and mechanical engineers to do testing. And so our needs do shift. So that's just the challenge, is every year trying to evaluate how are we going to build those relationships on different campuses to build the talent pools we need to satisfy the business. And what I've found is the only way to do that is build as holistic of a relationship with universities as possible. So you're not just building them built into these small pockets of student groups. Instead, you have a broader relationship with that university, so you can then kind of leverage those networks to have the sort of events, have the sort of contacts you need.
Great, thanks. So kind of switching gears a little bit, one question I always like to ask when meeting with recruiters, people from other companies. So just curious, what is the best professional advice like you've received since you've graduated?
I think it goes back to the idea of pursuing opportunities when they present themselves. Recently, I was talking to someone who's sort of like a top level director at Viasat, and he was like, we were talking to a group of students. He was like, I get imposter syndrome too. People come to me with questions, and I'm like, there has to be someone better to answer this. So I think a lot of times people will get in their own way, thinking like, oh, I can't do this. I'm not qualified for this. And I would say, pursue those opportunities, take on goals that you know are going to be challenging, being full aware of kind of leaning into that discomfort and put yourself in a position of like, I know this will be hard. I know I'm going to have to do a lot of learning, but that's what's going to propel me. If you always stay in your comfort zone, you'll never really strive for something more.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome, thanks. So I'll kind of open the floor up for questions, if you all have anything that you would like to ask. And I know, Asa, if I'm not mistaken, one of your first questions was, does your company hire international students?
Yeah, so I can answer that. In general, most of our roles, specifically in Tempe, do require US citizenship or permanent resident status. Not all of our roles do, but every role we have posted on our website does have a citizenship field at the towards the bottom of the posting, and it'll either say US citizen or permanent resident, or none. If it says none, anyone can apply to it. So we do hire non-US citizens. It is the minority of our roles, just to be honest. Part of that, a large part of that comes from the fact that we are a large defense company, and those roles usually do require citizenship just because of the class. You usually have to get clearances. You're dealing with classified information and such. But they're not, we do hire a handful every year of non-US citizens.
For the non-US citizen positions, do you know typically, is it kind of scattered throughout a lot of different positions, or is it specific types of roles?
So it's with, not in our government business, for one. So it'd be in the commercial side. And oftentimes, so there are technical roles, so STEM roles, but then a lot of them are also non-technical roles. So our marketing and finance roles, but there are still some in the STEM field that are in our commercial business. So like an app developer on the commercial side is developing an app for when you are using Viasat internet at home. There's no reason that has to be a US citizen, right? So roles like that are usually have no citizenship requirements.
Brandon, since we have plenty of time, would you mind just talking for a second about the roles that you have that are outside of engineering that you might have some opportunities in?
Yeah, so we hire a good amount of like financial analysts every year. So thinking just specifically around university grads and interns, finance, accounting, marketing. We do occasionally hire within our people and culture team. So what I work for, basically HR. Sometimes we'll have interns, a lot of times we'll have university grads, and there are teams within that. So like learning and development, recruitment, we'll sometimes hire for those. Let me think. Those are the big areas that hire year over year outside of STEM.
Awesome, thank you.
One question, how do you feel like your company will sort of evolve over the next, 5 to 10 years with trying to become more globally interconnected and things of that nature?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think just like you said, being globally interconnected. So the shift in the last couple of years, and very much we started putting structural action around how the company is structured into place, is moving from a US company that operates globally to a global entity, because very soon we will be a global internet service provider and have to think outside of this US centric way of thinking. With that comes challenges, of course. So we're making that shift now. So opening more offices globally, moving sort of the main functions of different groups to other locations. So a lot of our support services have moved to Ireland. So those are sort of the shifts we're making. And then looking at a more broader strategic like talent focus. So in my team of recruitment, how do we look at, instead of just the US talent market, how do we look at the global talent market and how we move forward? And then with things, how they're going, just how they've been right now, we're very much looking about how can we leverage what we're doing to make the world a more connected place. That's always been our mission, but I think now more than ever, people are very bought into it and understand why it's so critical.
Thanks. All right, so yeah, we'll open up the floor if you all have any additional questions you'd like to ask Brandon. Or if you feel more comfortable, you can put it in the
Yeah, we just got one in the chat. How will internships look like this summer with COVID-19 going on? So that's a conversation that's sort of ongoing. We're not closing any internships at this time or sending any offers at this time. Our executive team and my managers have been meeting to kind of make decisions. A lot of it right now has been a wait and see, because the government is dictating a lot of this stuff around lockdowns, travel. We at no point would I ever put employees, including our interns who are employees, at any additional risk. So we have a bunch of different contingency plans in place, pending what the US government decides to do moving forward and what our executive leadership decides to do. So I know that's not a direct answer, but we are working towards a resolution, but I think everyone is. I don't think we're unique, and I know for a fact we're not unique in that answer as a company. I think there will be a lot of clarity around all that in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Any work from home internships possible? So that's one of the things we're trying to, the recruiting team has been trying to diagnose what internship positions could be done fully remotely. That way, if it does come down from those that make decisions within Viasat and from outside of Viasat saying like, hey, you can't have on-site internships, which of our internships can become fully remote internships, and what are the steps we have to take to make sure interns feel supported, feel successful, and feel a part of the Viasat culture, even though they can't come experience all the cool stuff we usually do. It's a bummer because our internship program is a lot of fun. So our team's pretty sad if we do move fully virtual, but we are building in a lot of different plans to make sure it is a accurate representation of what it would have been.
Thanks. Yeah, you all can continue to ask questions in the chat box. Do you find that students that do internships with your company have a bit more of a competitive edge, or not necessarily?
So I think that's one of the good and bad things, right, about offering a really strong internship program and offering an internship where students are working on really applicable projects is, yeah, they become more competitive. If you're working in our Tempe office doing RF engineering, you're getting experience on RF technologies that really no one else in the world's working on. So you become a very hot commodity on the market. So yeah, I think there is a competitive edge there. In general, when I think about just looking at engineering, who is like our main competitors for talent, they're all the big ones, right? So Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, Workday is emerging as another like big competitor just for talent. But it is what it is. I think they become more competitive, but so the same thing is true of any of those other companies. When interns leave there, we see that on a resume and we're like, yeah, we would, if you worked at Microsoft doing software intern, you'd probably do really well here. So yes, but it's one of those things.
Definitely. Is there anything, you mentioned like some of your competitors, is there anything specifically about Viasat that you feel is kind of unique to your company as far as like employees' experience that they can expect that, you know, it's kind of a different thing?
Yeah, so like I talked about earlier, the company culture, awesome. People genuinely feel happy. I won't name any names of companies, but I have lots of friends that have worked at other engineering companies and firms that really get burnt out. I don't sense that at Viasat nearly as much. I think there is a lot of tangible actions the company does that shows the value they put in their employees, and it's not just talk. I think there's also a lot of transparency, which is really nice, as much as there can be in a company our size. And there's still a lot of, like I said, we're a flat organization, so talking to leadership is not unusual. Our CEO is very approachable. He's around the offices, even though now there's 5,000 plus employees. Like, it's not weird to bump into him at the cafe and be like, hey, Mark, how's it going? And he's accessible. He's also very hands-on with the university grads and interns. He has a big lunch with them every year. So just those little things. One of the things he says is we're like a startup that never grew up. So that startup culture really is still very much alive. Our founders are still with the company. They're still very hands-on with everything. So I think that makes us unique.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed, and that's really interesting, the CEO is so readily accessible. That's not something you commonly hear.
Yeah.
But one thing I've noticed in meeting with students when they're thinking about attributes they look for in a company is sort of company culture around like feeling accepted, around like philanthropic things of giving back. Do you know of any of like those type of initiatives that you all are a part of?
Yeah, Viasat has a philanthropic matching program. So what is it up to now? I think it's $5,000 a year they'll match. And then we have employee resources groups that they do a bunch of philanthropy every year. They do all sorts of different events. So there's a lot of those. What was the first part of your question? Sorry.
I said feeling accepted. So kind of like diversity initiatives or anything like that you're aware of.
Yeah. So the ERGs are a big diversity initiative. So we have a Women in Technology group. We have the Pride Alliance, which is our LGBTQ plus group. And then there's like 10 of them. And what I think is really great also is it's really easy to start a new one. So what I talk to university grads and interns about a lot is if you don't feel sort of like the group of folks that you want, it is really easy to connect with the director of our ERGs. Her name's Rebecca. Email her. You only need to get a few group people together to launch a new chapter. So there's a lot of room to start those different groups. Yeah, I mean, I think in general, employees are really supported to do that.
Thank you. I see we have a question in the group chat. So also ask, which application do you prefer, a person with a master's or a PhD?
I don't think it matters, to be honest. Like, and I know some students don't like hearing that because it's a lot of work for both. But I mean, when you get a PhD, it's very, 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 very specific. So unless you probably have a pretty good idea what your career is going to be once you get to that level, especially within engineering. With a master's, it's less specific. So it all depends. Like if you had a PhD in RF technologies that is aligned to the RF technologies we're doing, sure, we'd love to hire you. But if you have a master's degree in electrical engineering and have experience in RF, we'd like to hire you too. I think at that point, it becomes more about, do you fit the culture of the company? Do you have the skills that are necessary? And it becomes a lot less about your skills, your skill level and abilities, your technical abilities. It comes more around those intangibles that hiring managers look out for. Because anyone who has their PhD is a smart person and has a lot of skills.
In that same vein, are there any common mistakes that you've noticed students make in the interviewing process? So like lack of research or anything like that?
Lack of research is one. Know who the company is, what we do. Every company will have like a mission statement that's on their website. Find it, know it, understand why it's important. Take 20 minutes at least to go on their YouTube channel and watch their videos. It's the easiest way to find out not only what the company's doing, but if they're pushing, and this is across the board, if they're pushing it out on their social media or YouTube channel, it's what they want people to care about. So it's being able to understand what the company is pushing. So yeah, the research one's one. People who don't understand the company at all, that's a big red flag. That being said, you don't need to know everything. The other one is we are a very laid back company. And it would not be unusual for you to get interviewed in person by someone wearing shorts. That does not mean you should mirror that in your interview, which I think is a little hard for students to remember. I always advocate like overdress and be overly professional because that will never hurt you. Doing the opposite can. So I've seen some, and this is not just with Viasat, this is across now like 6 years in HR. I've seen some wild stuff in interviews. So some big ones, don't do it. Don't take your shoes off. I've had many people take their shoes off during an in-person interview with me. Don't take the gum out of your mouth and put it on the desk or something in front of you. Just stuff like that. Don't curse in the interview. I've had all of that stuff happen more than once. Every single one of those more than once. So think about what is your professional appearance.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. At my previous job, it was also with the Career Center. We would have students get real comfortable and start cussing with recruiters. And they're like, no, don't do that. Even if they're lax, like you should still be pretty professional. So
yeah, and I would say that extends out to all interactions with company representatives. You can be casual and still remember the setting, right? Remember the purpose of why you're interacting with a recruiter or people from a company. So we make a pretty good habit of having like candidate dinners after we do career fairs and such. So inviting everybody who is getting an on-campus interview with us out to dinner the night before. And we'll usually invite former interns and all the engineers. It's just a chance for you to get to know us outside of like a career fair prior to your interview. It makes things a little more relaxed. Even then, I tell the students, and I don't tell the engineers, I'm like, hey, still remember they are looking at you as a candidate, not just like you're a friend. And a lot of times it's like, I'm bringing engineers that are not far removed from college. So it's very easy for them to think like, oh, they're just my friend. And then the wheels kind of come off. I like to tell students like, you're always being evaluated, even in these sort of social settings.
yeah, definitely. That's really great advice. Another question in the group chat, what are some frequent questions during interview for students?
Well, I mean, in STEM, there's always going to be at least about half the interview is going to be technical based questioning, just to make sure we get a good assessment of your technical skills. But from there, it's nothing crazy. I think most companies have a sort of a, not generic, but they know what kind of cultural questions they want to ask to get to know you. So my advice more is like, have a really good sort of elevator pitch about yourself and what your passions are and what you're interested in. And that should be really polished up for like career fairs and stuff like that. But also there's a good chance your in-person interview might be with someone different. Make sure you're ready to pitch that. From there, be passionate about the projects you worked on. They're going to ask you about your projects and your experiences. Don't seem bored. Don't seem like you don't know the ins and outs of it. If it's on your resume, I want you to know it front to back, side to side. Like I want you to know it really well and tell me why you cared about it, what you learned about it. Because if you're not passionate about it, like we're not going to care. So show me why I should care. Those are the big things. And don't be afraid to like tell your story. Like if you have something that's off your resume, but you think it's an important attribute to who you are as a candidate, don't be afraid to share that. Like if you say like, I'm a first generation student and I worked my way through college and I'm really proud of the fact that I was able to support myself through college. And now I feel really prepared to dive into my career because up until this point, I've balanced school, projects, internships, and a part-time job for the last 4 years. And I'm still graduating right on the dean's list. I'm really proud of that fact. And I think that will position me to be a really strong candidate for XYZ company. So don't be scared to share stuff like that.
Thanks. You mentioned that there's not a huge difference between master's and doctorate as far as competitiveness. It really boils down to your relevant like skill set and experiences. Do you think that still applies for undergraduate and master's as well?
It depends. It really depends on the role. It's hard to say. Most of our roles do in our team, because we're like the university recruiting team, say bachelor's required. Some of them will say master's preferred. So it just depends, but we've interviewed master students and bachelor students for the same role and picked the bachelor students because they were a better fit. And even sometimes their skills were better. So it's hard to say.
We have another question in the group chat. What is the typical path for an intern to full-time employee?
Yeah, so most of our interns, we aim to hire them as juniors so that there's pretty much a direct pipeline to full-time. One of the things that we make clear to our business partners is that if the team has an internship, any interns open, there needs to be a path to conversion to full-time. So the intern program is a pipeline for full-time employment. So we actually have, it's pretty high, like 75 to 80% of our full-time hires do come from our internship program. So usually, let's say you're a junior intern, you work the summer, we like to make sure in the summer, beginning of fall, you have a full-time offer in your hand really quickly. So that way you can go into your senior year with a full-time offer.
Wow, that's really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'll kind of open the floor up for any last final questions.
And to build on that, that's not different. Like if you were a sophomore, which we do hire a pretty fair number of sophomores, far less freshmen, but a good number of sophomores, or seniors going on to their master's program. We will also, in that same time frame, offer you a returning intern offer a lot of the time. We've had tons of candidates who did 3 years of internship and then wound up full-time. So that's not unusual either.
Yeah, that's really nice to have that security. Another question, I have seen that there are many other locations other than Tempe. Do you usually relocate employees to their home?
So yeah, we have 35 offices globally. We would pay relocation depending on what office you were and the distance from your school. So we calculate the relocation amount from your school if you're a senior and from your physical home address for internship. So we offer relocation assistance for both. So yeah, let's say you lived in New Jersey and you got hired in Carlsbad, which is northern San Diego, we would offer you based off that relocation. I think that does that answer your question? Not sure. Cool.
In that same vein, would you mind just saying a couple of the different areas that your offices are located? You don't have to go through all of them, but just some of the major locations.
Yeah, the major ones, like I said, northern San Diego is Carlsbad. It's where I live. And then other major locations are Denver, Atlanta, Tempe, Germantown, Maryland, College Station, Texas. Those are some of the bigger ones. We have a very small office in San Jose.
Thank you. Another question, are there rotational shadowing opportunities for different departments to find the best fit in the company?
Not yet. Our operations team dropped my phone. Our operations team actually has piloted a rotation program this last year to see how it works. But more broadly, not yet. So that's something we are thinking about and working on. It has not come to fruition quite yet.
One question I just thought of, are there any, so once you're hired on as a full-time staff member, are there any opportunities for professional development, whether that be like webinars, conferences, what have you? What does that look like at your company?
Yeah, there's an abundance of professional development. We have if you're in the tech side, different groups hold tech talks and info sessions all the time. So those are always there. You're also, if you find an outside source that you would like to go to a conference or something like that, you just have to write a proposal to your manager. And they're pretty good about approving it as long as there's a good business case. I've gone to tons of different trainings. And then we offer, it's a little over $10,000 a year for financial reimbursement if you want to go pursue a degree, as long as it's related to the work you do, which is pretty nice. I have a friend right now, he got his degree in electrical engineering from UCLA in undergrad, and now he's finishing up his CS master's from UCLA online, and Viasat's pretty much paying for all of it, which is nice.
Yeah, that's extremely nice. Wow. Another question in the group chat. I'm just being curious, but would it be rude to ask the salary during the interview session to my prospective employer? I'm assuming this.
No, I would ask the recruiter. I wouldn't ask the people doing the actual interview. So you'll in the interview process for full-time, you will be in contact with a recruiter who does like the very first phone screen and helps schedule and all that. I wouldn't ask for the salary, I would ask for the salary range. And that is totally normal.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, any last final questions you all can think of? I just want to be sure, give everyone a chance. No? Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been very helpful to hear about the industry at large, as well as your specific company. It sounds really cool.
No problem.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And yeah, have a good rest of your day. Stay safe out there, you all.
Have a good day. Thank you all so much.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.